having sex while dating before marriage is important because, and I've heard this before,
you gotta
test drive the car before you buy it.
Yeah, that's a very prevalent thought amongst, all sorts of people.
I know that's something you believe in, but I was just curious, maybe.
And yes, I too would test drive my car before I bought it, except for the fact that a human is not a car.
I knew girls in high school that had had 3, 4, 5 abortions, which is so devastating. And people say it's not, but it is.
Anti-sex, anti-pictures of feet for money.
Totally. Yeah.
Anti-sexual favors outside of marriage.
I remember my very first sexual experience.
How many stories are we going to hear about you and sexual encounters? I had this twisted belief that if you wanted me enough, if you loved me enough, if you were attracted enough,
you'd violate all the boundaries.
So life-giving, so connecting, like the amount of emotional connection you and I experience after having sex.
Yeah. Incredible.
It's like it reboots us, it resets us.
It's a tool.
It was lust. It created this like polarity and draw and lust and like tug of war that felt like passion.
Yeah.
But actually they weren't respecting the boundaries that I had asked them to respect.
You're starting to feel some of that anxiety of like, I blew it. Like I really blew it in my life. I just want you to, and for those of you listening, you can do the same thing, but I want you to just pause for a moment, put your hand on your heart. I just want to say, I am so sorry for the ways that you felt violated. I'm so sorry for the ways that you didn't know the decisions that were best for your heart and your life. I'm sorry for the ways that you didn't know God in moments that he knew you and he loved you, that you weren't aware of his love for you.
I'm sorry for the people in your life who taught you that all you had to offer was your sexuality. Hello.
Hey, I'm super excited to get into the topic today. We're going to be talking about...
I don't even know what we're going to be talking about.
It's the culture. It's the highly sexualized culture in our society today. Okay, here's what we were talking about this before.
Sex.
Sex.
Just be prepared to hear a lot of sex and sexual words.
Here's the thing, like we've talked to, innuendos. We've talked to so many different 20-somethings, 30-somethings where sex is just so a part of like even Christians, a lot of Christians, like sex is just a normal part of dating before marriage. And I was surprised to hear how many people I've talked to that sex is just a normal thing before you're married. And obviously, people have differing beliefs and some of you might be listening to that going like, oh, that is ghastly and that's so crazy. And then some of you might be like nodding your head and going like, yeah, I do believe that. So I think it'd be fun to have a discussion talking about it. I also just watched, and I've been watching some different like interviews with people that are like totally not Christian, but like in our society, like people having discussions and debates about what's healthy in culture and what's a great way to live lifestyle. And there's this podcast called the Whatever Podcast, where this dude who's married, great dude, conservative values, will have these discussions with all of these like Gen X, Gen Z women that hop on. OnlyFans girls, girls that, have crazy beliefs about government, crazy beliefs about like, I'll say this. It's crazy to me, but it's not crazy to them. It's normal. But I am learning a lot about the way that people think that is so vastly different than the way that I think. And
would you say that I kind of fall into their category? So you think very differently, and you'd say that I'm probably like a lot more like them. Right?
We would not be married, and I would not trust you with my child if that were the case whatsoever.
You guys, I'm not pro OnlyFans. I'm not pro politics.
What? Pro politics?
I don't know the other categories we're going to talk about today.
I despise politics in general. I don't care what they are.
Anti-politics.
Yeah. Yes.
Anti-sex. Anti-pictures of feet for money.
Totally. Yeah.
Anti-sexual sexual favors outside of marriage.
But I think what really bothers me in these discussions too is when people come with a very, very religious lens, and religious in that you are bringing oppression to people based on your core values and belief systems that even may be foundational in biblical truths and everything, but imposing that on people that have not had a heart transformation or encounter with Jesus. And so bringing those weird judgments and that Pharisaical judgment to the table is not helpful for the discussion either. Yeah. And so I wanted to have a discussion where we can talk about some of these things from a non-judgmental lens, but also maybe build a case for why we have the belief systems that we have and why we coach and counsel 20-somethings, some 30-somethings. I mean, and honestly, I had a guy I'd met with that was a 50-something the other day.
Well, we've had clients that are in their 80s.
But I would say, like, as a majority, of people that deal with these question marks in their lives, it's like 20, 30-somethings. That's like that generation where they've felt confused on what is okay and right and the best thing to do. First thing I wanted to bring up, though, was the belief that having sex while dating before marriage is important because, and I've heard this before, you gotta test drive the car before you buy it.
That's a very prevalent thought amongst, all sorts of people.
I know that's something you believe in, but I was just curious, maybe.
And yes, I too would test drive my car before I bought it, except for the fact that a human is not a car. And I know for me, though I gave up my virginity when I was 18, if you guys have listened to any of our previous sex podcasts, you'll hear some of our sexual history. We really just lay it all out there nice and raw.
Yeah.
So I also want to just like preface this with like, I have experienced a lot of different things, and I have a lot of people that I love that live very different than I do in ways that don't align with my beliefs. And I still can have love and compassion for all of those people and for younger me who made dumb decisions that caused her a lot of pain. I feel love and compassion for myself in those areas too. So even though I gave up my virginity when I was 18, had sex for a week, and then never again until my wedding night, I chose to not have sex for how many years? Almost 5 years, because I wanted to really value myself. I wanted to value my sexuality. I wanted to value my future husband. I wanted to value bringing as much purity as I could to you. And I also wanted to save all of those sexual experiences that I could have had for the person that I was going to have it with for the rest of my life. I didn't want to bring in a bunch of memories and a bunch of experiences, whether they were, quote unquote, good or bad. I wanted to be able to cultivate real intimacy with you. So
there's also something about I'll just add this in.
Okay.
Why is it that when we give secondhand shoes, clothing, toys to children, or things that we've received growing up, we receive them secondhand, third hand, fourth hand, that we find them less valuable than if we were to receive them brand new. And I think there's just something to that too, where it inherently devalues the thing that you're receiving, which I would say virginity, sex is such a gift that is meant for one person.
So sacred.
It's very sacred that when it's been given to 20, 30, 40, 50 people, then how can that not have lost value to the person that you're spending the rest of your life with, is one of those things that I would say.
And it doesn't mean, say you're listening to this and you're like, I have slept around with a lot of people. It doesn't mean that is diminished for your spouse or your future spouse.
There's redemption available.
All of those things can be redeemed and restored, but do you most likely have more you're going to have to heal from and work through with your spouse? Most likely. If you guys are really wanting to cultivate rich intimacy, your spouse will probably have things that they need to work through, pain and insecurities and fear around sexuality, and there's just going to be more layers of cleanup that you'll probably have to do.
It's not punishment. It's just you can't always control. It's a consequence. You can't always control what triggers and feelings may come up in a moment.
So back to test driving a car. Yes, I will test drive a car before I buy it, but I'm not an object. I I chose to save sex for marriage, at least in the context of what I already shared with you guys, because I know that I have worth and value. I didn't need to prove my worth and value, and I didn't want to diminish your worth and value by saying I needed to figure out what sex was going to be like before I chose into it.
You were scared I had a small penis, though.
I was. You guys, we had been best friends for 2 years. This is the context. Best friends for 2 years. And then whenever we started dating, we were like 3 weeks in. And you told me you were in love with me 3 weeks in, and I was already in love with you too. So 3 weeks into dating for us was actually a 2-year build up for that. And I remember one night we'd gone out with a bunch of friends and everyone had come over and we're hanging out on the couch. I think a few people left and went to bed. And I just was leaning against you and looked at him and I said, I'm terrified you have a small penis. And it was just a fear. It was just a fear that I had carried in general. If I'm saving sex for marriage, I'm afraid that I'm going to show up on my wedding night and not be able to feel anything. And that would be devastating.
Well, I had a lot of comments because I always stood up for men that may have that situation. Yeah. And I'm honestly, I've heard so many different reports and data of it's not a big deal. It's more about what would I say?
It's not the size of the ship. It's the motion of the ocean.
Yeah, exactly. So, but you heard me saying all those things.
He was defending the small penis so frequently that I was he's trying to prepare me.
Yeah, sure.
Which would have been okay too. But I also wanted to be honest about my fear.
So funny.
So he just started cracking up and he said, I think you'll be fine. And then I said, well, I have really small boobs and I'm really insecure that you won't like them.
And then I said, I think we'll be fine.
Anyways.
But big side tangent. But I think just the fact that we had open discussions like this too, without shame, I think was so important and so healthy. Because I learned as a Christian that you can't talk about these things. Even some of you listening to this, you might be cringing as you're hearing us have these dialogues or conversations, the things that we said. It's how can they say these things, and it's okay. You're entitled to your beliefs and opinions about it. But I personally believe that closing the door to a subject and not talking about them doesn't create more health. Yeah. It leaves more room for ambiguity. Shame. Yeah. Or ambiguity, shame, confusion, filling in the blanks with things that, may or may not be healthy. It's where can we have these discussions? I remember probably 6 months of the most healing times of my life. We're talking to mentors, a counselor, my life coach about all of these questions I never got answered from my dad. And it was so healing and helpful for me because it fortified some things in me where I was oh, whether I'm connected to God or not in a season, I have these core values for the way I live. And that led me into turning down sex many times when I was a young adult, before, when I was single. And I'm so thankful because I had this core beliefs in me where I'm that's not good. That's not healthy. That's not helpful for me. And I don't want it. Yeah. I honestly, that's why I believe having conversations like this are so important.
Yeah. I think having a safe place with safe people that you trust and being able to ask all of the hard questions, being able to be honest about where you're at, the decisions you're making, what you're struggling with, that's the safest place to be able to work through these things and get healing in your sexuality. And if you don't have a healthy outlet, you're going to find unhealthy ways to express something that is a part of your identity. Our sexuality is one of the main core parts of our identity, the thing that you are assigned at birth. It's he's a boy, she's a girl. And these
days, that's why that's being threatened so much.
These days, it's getting so complicated, but we're not going to dive into that. I'll just say, it's such a core part of who we are is our sexuality, and we can't shut it off. There's not a switch on it, and it will find a way to work its way out. I think it can get shut down and suppressed in different ways. Yep. But having a safe space to be able to process through these things is so necessary. And most of us didn't get this from our moms and dads. Yep. And it's why I think sexual dysfunction starts, is these unmet needs from parents early on.
I remember, and I've shared this story many times, you've heard it, but I remember being in a bar and I'd heard this girl that was kind of in a group that I'd been around a few times, that she would talk about sex in this way. It was just this big performance. And you know, and she kind of she would openly share things that she would like and prefer in bed. And it just was interesting that these were normal conversations. And I was like, okay. But one day I was talking with her at one of the bars in Reading, you know, and I got into this discussion, and she was like, well, you know, asking me questions. She's like, I heard from so-and-so that you're a virgin. Like, is that true? And I was like, yeah, does that affect our friendship in any way? Like, you know, and she's like, well, no, I just, like, aren't you worried, you know, that you're not going to be good at it someday? Like, I've learned to get good at other things. Like I shared this with her. I was like, I've learned to get good at things in my life. Like, I think practice, you know, you could learn to get good at them. Like, I don't have any fears or concerns that I'll get good at it with my future wife.
I learned how to ride a bike.
I did say that.
How to take a test and to drive a car.
And I have excelled at all of those things. I'm no Tour de France, you know, Lance Armstrong, but I can ride a bike. And with my hands up, actually. No hands on the handlebars, you know? Okay, don't make this weird. So I told her that, and she's like, well, I mean, I just feel like you need somebody to, like, you know, I don't know, show you how to do it, you know, that could teach you. And I was like, wait a second. I like, it occurred to me, I was like, oh, she's making an offer here, but like implying, I was like,
so crazy.
Are you offering to teach me to have sex? And she gets kind of blushed, and she's like, well, oh, I mean, I just think it would be fun. And I was like, wow. I was like thinking to myself, that would have been a great opportunity for like any number of guys to say yes. Like, how many guys, and she's a beautiful, attractive woman, but I was repulsed at the idea, not because I'm like, I didn't think she was attractive, it was because I'm like, that's repulsive to me. The idea of devaluing something that is a gift I want to give to somebody that's sacred someday. And I told her, I was like, I was just honest. I think at this time I was being very honest with what I felt. And I was really practicing, not just throwing out religious things. Not that I love the word, I love my relationship with God, but at the time I was like, I'm not hiding behind those things anymore. I'm hiding behind my own, I'm going to live behind my own feelings, thoughts, and what I own as my core values. So I told her, I was like, I'd be terrified to have sex with you. And she's like, what, why? I was like, you just described sex as this like big performance and the way you'd want it and like, you know, all these different things. And I was like, that doesn't sound safe for me. You know, I want to be able to mess up and fall off the bed and like make mistakes and laugh about it with the person that I'm learning with, that I'm in love with. And that doesn't feel like that's a space that you'd be able to create or know how to do. It's not a vulnerable act for you. It's something that, you know, you have to perform for. I was like, that's not something that I want. Yeah. And I think through this discovery though, I learned to articulate things that I've heard from other people that they didn't know how to articulate, but because I was in such a journey of asking these intentional questions of what do I want? Why don't I have sex before marriage? Because I didn't know at the time. Yeah. I felt so disconnected from God in that season that I was like, man, I feel scared of decisions I could make in this place. I need to learn. And so learning about these things was really helpful. I think going like, what are the consequences? Is it just STDs? Right. Or is it something else? You know, because I think there's a lot of religious cultures trying to scare us into all of these like sin consequences or, you know, disease and stuff. It's like, yeah, but what about the other stuff? Yeah. Where this is going to affect my 10-year vision with my family and my spouse. This is going to affect me emotionally and my connection to my heart. Then I'm going to feel that heart violation.
Oh my gosh. Well, even I remember feeling clear in my teenage years, because I think I was 12 when I decided I was going to save sex for marriage. And I got a purity ring and I signed a covenant card.
Wow.
That like it was like vowing.
That's legit.
And in my heart, I genuinely wanted purity and I wanted to please God and I wanted a godly man. Yeah. And I felt happy to make that sacrifice. Sure. And I really held to that up until I was 16, I think. And which there was a lot of opportunity. I know that sounds really young for you guys, but there was a lot of opportunity before that. And some of you are like, yeah, there was a lot of things that happened before I was 16.
Yeah.
For sure. I didn't really have anyone around me that was pouring into me. I didn't have any leaders in my life. I didn't really have any friends that were saving sex for marriage. And so I started kind of like pushing the boundaries in relationships, where it was like, okay, how far can I go without having sex? Like, what lines can I cross?
Sure.
And I got to a place where I think that I really talked myself into letting go of my values. And, you know, people would say things like, you're not going to be able to wait until you're married. Like, you're going to, you know, blah, 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 blah. All of the things coming against my beliefs. And for a long time, I stood up for myself and fought for it. And then I got to a place where I think I had seared my conscience, like my heart, so much that I was no longer sensitive to my own convictions. Like, I knew that I wanted to have, like, save sex for marriage up until I was 18. But it was like, well, if I do other stuff, then who cares? And as long as I'm dating the person, then who cares?
Yeah.
And
as
so,
long as we live.
So much like compromise entered in my heart. And then I got desensitized to listening to my heart and being able to feel if something felt violating for me emotionally or not. And, you know, in that journey, you know, especially dating you, like if you fast forward from when I gave up my virginity at 18 to dating you, you were the most intimate relationship I had had in that 7 year, no, when did we start dating? I was 23, in that 5 year period.
Yeah.
And so there were so many areas where we were both fighting for purity, but I could feel a total apathy around sexuality and would want to push boundaries all of the time because I had violated my heart years ago and I hadn't actually restored that part of my heart. I hadn't built any equity with my own heart of listening to my convictions and choosing to make like decisions that honored myself and honored God and honored the person.
And when I was making decisions to honor you, you felt rejected.
Oh yeah.
Which made it so difficult for me because I'm like, I don't want you to feel rejected at all. I'm trying to not have sex with you before we get married.
Right.
But you were like, what am I not, you know?
It just communicated to me that
why is it so easy?
I had this twisted belief that if you wanted me enough, if you loved me enough, if you were attracted enough,
you'd violate all the boundaries.
That you would struggle more and that you'd feel more temptation and that you'd violate the boundaries.
Right.
And it's because that was the love, quote unquote, that was given to me by every other man, was like, I felt wanted by them violating my own boundaries that I set up.
Yeah.
But it created this like attraction, like lust. It was lust. It created this like polarity and draw and lust and like tug of war that felt like passion.
Yeah.
You know, but actually they weren't respecting the boundaries that I had asked them to respect.
Okay, so real quick, just wanted to take a quick second to say that if you're tired of feeling stuck in sadness, disconnect, or feeling powerless to relationship triggers.
Maybe you just feel swirly internally and you don't fully feel powerful to work through your emotions, and you really want to be more connected to yourself and to God. We really encourage you to click the link below the description.
Yeah, so we have like a full hub of all the courses we've ever created for emotional health, spiritual health. The best thing you could ever do if you have a vision for your life of who you want to be is to get help or mentorship from people that are ahead of you in some specific area. And that's in order to become the person that the loved ones in your life deserve.
In this hub called the Alive and Free Collective, we have a monthly coaching call with us, a monthly teaching and Q&A with trusted experts we love, and we have a community of believers on an emotional health journey. And like we said, all the emotional health courses we've offered and a vault of over 50 trainings from the top emotional health leaders giving their best guidance.
It's only $47 a month, and you can learn all about that if you click the link below. And if you want to learn how to be a safe leader and coach others and start a life coaching business, you can click the link below as well in the description to learn about our program, Coach Launch. Okay, back to everything that's important. I remember the first sexual experience that I had with a woman was when I was kind of like dating, and there was a situation with a girl and I didn't even want it to happen. It's not the really bad one that happened, that, you know, I split up with my girlfriend at the time. Again,
we share in detail our experiences. You have to scroll back probably 2 years.
Not that far, maybe a year. Maybe it was 2 years. I don't know. I can't remember. But you'll see there's other episodes down there you can scroll. But I remember my very first sexual experience. I'd gotten drunk, and so did the girl. And, you know, before I knew it, she was naked, and it was like something happened. And I was like, this is terrible. I didn't want it to happen. I kind of felt violated by the whole situation because she was the one making moves. And then the next morning, I was like, I felt so much shame. And I went into what I normally did, which was a pool of shame and self-loathing. And like, how could I? I am a terrible, terrible Christian. God must despise me and not want to look at me. That's what I felt. And that was, I was battling that voice of shame and accusation for so long. And I think a lot of us think if you hate the sin enough, you'll stop doing it. Yeah. And it's just, it doesn't work that way.
Or if you love God enough, then you just won't sin.
You just won't. Yeah. And it's like, those who love me keep my commands. And that's something that Jesus said, but it's not the same. It's not the same thing. We love because he first loved us. That's 1 John. And we need to encounter love from him. The woman that was caught in adultery locked eyes with him at a moment in her worst, that she was facing the biggest shame and consequences she could have faced for something like that at that time. But for me, I was like, I didn't know how to connect with unconditional love. And so I needed to have an encounter with that. And so I called a mentor and he's like, stop shaming yourself. He's like, you need to recognize that you're the one that's accusing and shaming yourself, not God. He is not doing that. Like, that is not what he does. There is no evidence for that whatsoever. In the person of Jesus. And it just was such a wake up call. And I had to actually learn to let forgiveness in. And so in that moment though, after praying through it and then journaling a bunch, I reached out to that girl. I was like, hey, can we meet up? We actually met up at church. And I was like, hey, listen, we're both adults. You know, we made decisions. Personally, I don't like the decision I made with you. I don't want any long-term relationship with you. And I violated my heart by choosing to do things last night. And I was like, I think it's your desire to be wanted. And it was my desire to be wanted that led us into a moment that, you know, ultimately was dissatisfying for me because I don't have an intimate union with you. Yeah. And I was like, I'm sorry. I respect you a whole hell of a lot more than I showed it. Yeah. And, you know, would you forgive me? And that was like the moment she did the same thing, and it was really sweet. But I walked away going, oh, I have a case built now for why I don't like those situations. Yeah. And so the next time when I was in a dating relationship where a girl dropped her clothes in front of me, I walked downstairs and I was like, I don't want this. Yeah. And the things ended that day, but I started building a case for this. Yeah. And I think it's necessary.
Yeah, it's the point that I forgot to make a minute ago. Yeah. I was thinking about, you were saying you didn't have a value for why you were saving sex for marriage, you know, and in that season you started learning that. And for me, one of the big motivators too, besides like wanting to protect that gift, wanting to experience it with my husband, was more understanding that I'm creating a deeper attachment spiritually, physically, and emotionally every time I engage in a sexual encounter with somebody. Yeah. And whenever I had learned that, you know, just in a logical level, like, okay, whenever you engage in any sexuality with someone, you're actually creating union. When you engage physically, you're actually becoming one with that person in spirit. Yep. And knowing that you aren't committed to that person creates so much more fear, like triggers surface, like you guys know it. Like if you've had any kind of sexual encounters with someone you are not with today, how much harder and weirder was it to walk away from that person? Yeah. How much more painful was it? So like learning that I'm actually connecting myself to this person spiritually, physically, and emotionally, and say they end it with me, it's going to be so much more painful for me to heal from and for me to like pick up the pieces and be able to move on. And I didn't want to give a piece of myself to every man that I dated, you know, and I gave away way more than I wished I had, that's for sure. But I'm really thankful because at 18 years old, I learned a really valuable lesson, you know, which is that even if there weren't people in my life that were championing me and like supporting me in my decision, I got to figure out for myself what I wanted and why. Yeah. And even though it took me losing my virginity, we broke up literally 5 days later, and he thought I was lying about my virginity. And I just was like, fine, if you don't believe me, then
we're done.
Yeah. And I knew it. It was like this thing in my gut where I knew if I ever had sex before marriage, it would put too much pressure on the relationship and it would end and it'd be a waste. And I was really devastated, not because I really loved that guy. I was really devastated because I gave away such a sacred part of myself.
Yeah.
And it felt really easy after that to solidify that, no, this is something that I want to protect, until I reach my wedding night. And I'm really thankful because it actually made my future relationships and those breakups that happened, it made them easier to navigate through, because I could actually process through the decision like on a more logical level, and I wasn't as attached. I hadn't created that deep level of bond with them. That makes processing and decision making so much harder to do.
Yeah. I mean, I met with, I met this girl at a conference, a business conference.
How many stories are we going to hear about you and sexual encounters?
Well, this wasn't a sexual encounter, but I can share more if you want.
Number 5. Who else dropped their clothes in front of you?
Well, I had a girl try and pull me into her house when her parents weren't home, and I had to pull my arm away from her.
I was joking.
Oh, okay, sorry.
This was a joke.
Back in the day, okay, I was like the Fonz.
The ladies
Just kidding.
loved me.
They loved me. Oh, I was like Anchorman. Everybody, come look at me. Look how awesome I am.
Anchorman. I thought you said Angerman.
Angerman.
He's angry because he's not having sex.
Yes. Yep.
He's sexually frustrated.
It's like hangry, but different. Gosh.
Wait, can we just pause for a second? Because everyone needs to know that Spencer's wearing blue toe spacers right now.
Oh, you're talking about these guys?
He's got blue.
And no, I'm not getting a pedicure.
I'm actually so proud of you because I really like that you're rehabbing your body so intentionally, but it's so funny to look down.
Well, the problem is like wearing such narrow shoes for so long, your toes come in. It's not healthy for you. It's not good. And so I'm having to now repair all these things that
I tried telling you all these
sports
things for
injuries.
Years.
This specific toe, specific toe from like jujitsu and all that stuff has been totally jacked.
So anyways, what was the next sexual encounter?
Okay. Well, no, here's what I was going to say is that I met this girl up at this business conference, and we got into a discussion because, I mean, like at the time I just was running after my own emotional health. And, and at the time, I think we were just friends. You were kind of like into somebody at the time. And this girl, we got in a discussion, she's polyamorous, which means she has multiple love relationships, multiple sex partners at the same time. And the men knew about each other and still engaged as her multiple boyfriends. And her justification was, I just have too much love to give for one person. And it feels good, and we all feel good, and we don't have any ego. Like, why does one person belong to you, and all these different things. And I was just like, that's a very interesting way to live. And I'm like, it's not my goal to judge a person. It's not my goal to draw conclusions over them. I don't know the life they've lived or how much they've been exposed to unconditional love, how much they've been exposed to God, encountering God. That's my job. My job as a believer is I want to be an experience of love that makes people want to turn away from unhealth and their lifestyles that aren't godly. And I think too many believers are trying to force upon others what we do in government, which is legislating morality, and you can't legislate your morality on another person. It just doesn't work that way. They need a heart transformation. And so I'm talking to this girl, non-judgmental, but I just, in chatting with her, I'm like, that doesn't make sense, because you're saying that just because it feels good and just because I have a lot of love to give, I should be having sex with multiple people. And to me, like, I remember months after that hearing about it from her, that one of the guys got really jealous and it kind of blew up. And I was like, yeah, I knew that was going to happen, because what happens for those men is they immediately feel like they're having to share somebody they're in love with another person. And it devastates all trust built in that relationship. Totally. But that's in a similar fashion. That's what happens when we're having sex with multiple partners all the time. If I heard that was the way that you dated, I would feel incredibly unsafe in our dating journey. I wouldn't feel safe about that. I wouldn't feel like you cared about me or that you were saving something for me or that you're prioritizing me. I would feel like, oh, you care more about your impulses than you do about your future marriage and protecting that.
Yeah.
And in the same way, boundaries are about protecting something. It's not about going, no, God says no because he wants to suck all fun out of your life. It's like, no, he's not a fun sucker. He wants your life to be fully satisfying, but we don't always trust him in that. And we believe, it's kind of like, how many gourmet meals can you have in a day and have it still be satisfying?
Right,
is it?
Right.
And it's like, no, there's a time and a place for that. Otherwise you start getting fat. There's consequences to the decisions. Like, you don't appreciate it anymore. It's not fun anymore. It's not like there's so many things that diminish its value when you do that. And in the same way, like, sex is meant to be something that is done with one person because you are seeing deeper and deeper into another person. You're building more closeness with a person. Yeah. You don't get to hide in that place, and that can feel very scary for a lot of people. And people that have like lots of different sex around them, it's almost like this, like trying to spread your eggs in multiple baskets.
No pun intended.
Right? I didn't mean for that to work out so well. But for me, I'm like, okay, what am I protecting? Is it just, I'll say it this way. We wouldn't let somebody else come into our marriage right now, right?
Right now?
I'm saying,
right,
that's what I'm
never.
saying. It's a preposterous thing to even bring up.
Yeah, we would never bring anybody else into our marriage. And that includes pornography.
Right,
we would never bring another person, even through a screen.
But even some people are okay with pornography, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, cool. We can have another discussion about that. But we would never bring a person into our relationship sexually. That just feels like, why would you even bring that up? That's like not even an idea. That's a boundary. It's an obvious boundary, but it's because why? We're protecting our bed. We're protecting our marriage connection.
Intimacy,
we're protecting our intimacy. That vision existed long before we walked in it.
Yeah.
I can still protect that 10 years ahead of time.
Right.
And that's what we do a lot of times with our behaviors now. So if I want to make lots of money and build a business that's successful 10 years from now, that's going to require a lot of sacrifices and investments now to sow into that future vision. And I think what a lot of us lose sight of is the reason for that vision, the why. What am I saving myself for anyways? And we don't see marriages that are worth fighting for. And I think that's what a lot of people our age and younger are probably battling nowadays. Is like, I don't even know what I'm saving this for. It's fun. It feels good. Let's just do it.
Well, I mean, so many of us haven't witnessed healthy, loving, committed marriages. And so because we look at all of these monotonous couples, what's the right word? Monogamous. And it feels monotonous.
That word worked out though.
It did.
I was like, I'm with you. I'm tracking.
Said it and
monogamous.
Like,
now I'm not tracking.
It's right, but it's not. But we see all these monogamous married couples.
Yeah, mahogany.
And rich mahogany leather-bound books.
Totally mahogany, yeah.
And it feels so monotonous. Let's just throw this in there while I'm at it.
Oh my gosh, I feel like this is a Mary Poppins song.
This isn't an Instagram reel clip, that's for sure. So many of us see
Yes.
I can't.
Monotonous monogamy.
Wow. So many of us have witnessed monogamous relationships that are disconnected and boring, and the couples aren't in love. They don't enjoy each other.
They're not having sex.
They're not having sex. They're not full. They're not fulfilled. They're going through the motions. It's monotony.
Yeah.
And because we don't have vision for what it looks like to be wildly in love and connected and passionate about each other and healthy.
Yeah.
Actually connected, working through things, having good intimacy, a consistent sex life. Because we haven't witnessed that, I think there are so many people in our generation today that are challenging that status quo, which is monogamous relationships.
Yes.
And if we go back to what you were saying about so many people having multiple sexual partners and they don't want to put all their eggs in one basket, no pun intended again. I think it's...
Spread their seeds in one garden.
I think that is truly self-protection. Having sex with all these people, because then you actually never have to be seen.
Unhealthy self-protection. Yeah.
Yes. You never have to be seen and known. You never have to truly be intimate. You never feel fully vulnerable or exposed.
Yeah.
Because now you're giving it away to everybody. So now it's no longer sacred.
There's no fear of rejection.
You don't have to actually commit. You don't have to fully let them in. You're just getting a quick experience, and then you can leave right after. You don't have to share your emotions or your fears. There's no fear of rejection, fear of abandonment. And I think we'll feel like this type of person that I'm talking about. I think that you could feel glimpses of those things, glimpses of vulnerability, fear of being alone, anxiety, rejection, abandonment. But we easily escape those emotions with another sexual experience. Right. We're dissociated. So we're medicating and trying to find the next thing to fill and to create this physical sensation to escape that pain.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I think that is what real self-protection is. It's like you're never getting to engage in real intimacy and true intimacy. Like the sex that we experience, so satisfying, so life-giving, so connecting. Like the amount of emotional connection you and I experience after having sex,
incredible.
It's like it reboots us, resets us.
It's a tool.
Yes.
Meant for marriage, but it becomes a medication outside of marriage.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. It's like, because the rush of chemicals and an emotional attachment that comes, like you were saying earlier with sex, it's like that, in my opinion, it actually completely removes your ability to get to know somebody outside of that expression, it puts you under the influence. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to make compromises on things that I noticed about you, character traits, ways you responded, because
you have rose-colored lenses after that. Yep. You're seeing them through the lens of all of this supercharged connection and intimacy you just experienced.
Like over what it does is it brings me more to the present and away from a longer term time horizon. So I'm not going to make assessments of how is she going to be as a mom to my children? Mm-hmm. How is she going to show up in the midst of huge triggers when we're not having sex? Yeah. How is she going to show up when we have the biggest conflict of our lives? How is she going to show up when she feels disconnected from God? Is she going to run to get help? It's like all these different things. Well, how are you going to find that out if you're not getting to know each other without being under the influence to those things? Right. Another thing that I feel like was super helpful for me was learning that, and this is crazy, I've heard crazy stories about this, and it's not just on this side, but as a man, it's all I was aware of, is that there are women that are trying to bag a good guy so bad to where they will sabotage condoms. They'll try and get pregnant. And I heard about this, and I'd heard about this from different men in different situations where I was like, I became terrified. Is there going to be a woman that's going to that would try and do that to me? Mm-hmm. And then the risk of STDs, the risk of pregnancy. I knew girls in high school that had had 3, 4, 5 abortions, which is so devastating. And people say it's not, but it is.
I mean, the amount of women that have gone through our Come Alive program and have had serious trauma we've had to walk them through, and so much grief and loss. Yes. Even though at the time, some of them didn't want to have a baby, didn't want their life to change, but the amount of grief they've had to work through since then, and the amount of pain and baggage that they carry because of that decision. It's been at least dozens of women that we've walked through healing that. And I want to just say again, we're saying none of this with judgment. No. Absolutely none of it. We're having a conversation about it, but I want you to know, it weighs heavy on our hearts, and we feel a ton of love and empathy and compassion.
Let me do this. If you do resonate with any of those things and you're listening to this or watching it, and you feel any shame, you feel any grief, you feel accusation, you feel like that's me, or you're starting to feel some of that anxiety of I blew it. I really blew it in my life. I just want you to, and for those of you listening, you can do the same thing, but I want you to just pause for a moment, put your hand on your heart. I just want to say, I am so sorry for the ways that you felt violated. I'm so sorry for the ways that you didn't know the decisions that were best for your heart and your life. I'm sorry for the ways that you didn't know God in moments that he knew you and he loved you, that you weren't aware of his love for you.
I'm sorry for the people in your life who taught you that all you had to offer was your sexuality, that was what you had to bring to the table, that you wouldn't be loved or chosen or seen or valued or wanted if you had boundaries and if you actually protected your sexuality.
And I break shame over you, and I just release God's forgiveness over you, that he forgives you, that he sees you as pure and holy, that Peter said in scripture, regard no one as unholy, that you get to actually take that it says that Jesus drew near to the brokenhearted, and the places that you feel like your heart has been broken, he can make it brand new. Yeah. And I just release that newness over your heart, over your mind.
And because of the cross, your sin is as far as the east is from the west. Like it says, he threw it into the sea of forgetfulness and he remembers it no more.
Yeah.
So when he looks at you, he doesn't see the amount of people you've slept with. He doesn't see the decisions that you've made. He doesn't see the things that have happened to you or the things you've done to other people. He actually sees you as the version of you that he created, the pure and spotless and blameless version of you.
And how amazing is this that in Galatians, in Genesis 3, when Adam and Eve fell, he pursued them. He went out looking for them. Where are you? They didn't have to pursue him. He pursued them. And then once discovering what they had done, he clothed them.
They realized that they were naked. Their eyes were opened, and then they felt shame seeing that they were naked. And then they tried to cover themselves, and he actually covered them for them.
Yep. And then he blocked the tree of life so they wouldn't have to permanently be in that situation the rest of our lives, because in his grace, he recognized, okay, this is the decision they made. I'm going to do what I can with the decisions they made to love them, protect them. And then my plan now is to reveal my nature to them. And so years and years down the road, they will see me in the person of Jesus, and all of this will be redeemed and restored. And I just think that's the beautiful thing, that you have to accept. All of us have things that we probably regret from past lives, or things that we've done that maybe bring us shame, but we have to partner with and agree with the forgiveness that Jesus has for us, while also unpacking what is wisdom and what's best for us inside of relationship.
Yeah. Like I know for years I carried this feeling of shame, like feeling like I was gross for the decisions that I made. And I often felt plagued, by the memories. They would just like hit me over and over and over again. And I just felt gross. There was like this overall feeling like I'm gross and I'm not enough. And it wasn't until I could actually look back at that version of Sammy and try to look at her through the lens of compassion and look at, why did she make that decision? What was happening? How was she feeling? What were the other factors in her life? And was she doing the best she knew how to do with what she had?
Yeah.
And if I look back, like, no, I was in so much pain. My parents were divorced, and no one was really teaching me and leading me. And if I did get taught or led, it wasn't enough. There was too many other influences. I didn't know who I was. I had so much unprocessed trauma from my childhood that influenced the ways that I connected and related. I had so much pain and wounding towards my dad of not feeling pursued when I was younger. And that left a gaping hole in my heart to want to feel wanted by men.
Yeah.
And also there were other things I carried that got passed down from my parents that they hadn't healed from our process through. And I learned at a young age to partner with lust in order to try to get what I wanted or get what I needed, because I didn't know what love was. And no one had shown me that or taught me that. So if you look back at the decisions you've made, it's so important to get out of the judgment seat over your own life and operate from the lens of compassion.
Yeah.
Because Jesus, everything that he did, it said he was moved with compassion.
Yeah.
If our goal as a Christian, which means little Christ-like one, is to be like him, then we first need to partner with his compassion over us.
Yeah.
So go back and look at, why did I do those things that I did? And how can I actually lean into feeling compassion for myself? Because compassion will dismantle judgment in your life.
And how can you hold yourself to a higher standard? I started seeing myself as a leader And like the word says, we're kings and priests. You know, he's the King of kings, but what are we? Right? We're a royal priesthood. And I started feeling immense purpose in my identity, getting to be a symbol of love and protection to women when they would reach for that and they would want that desire to be loved and wanted met in a sexual experience with me. They could probably feel my resolve. They could feel like they probably desired that. There were things that I carried as a man that they probably wanted, my directness, my boldness, my honesty. And I found it incredibly purposeful getting to love a woman sitting across from me and be like, you deserve so much more than this.
Yeah.
And I think we have to recognize that we're leaders and influencers in everything that we do. If you're in a situation, you're like, yeah, but this girl wants to sleep with me, that she wants to do these things with me. Okay, why don't you recognize that you're a leader and you have an opportunity don't shame yourself into leading her, and don't do it out of obligation, but go, I have an opportunity to love with restraint. I have an opportunity to partner with Holy Spirit and have self-control. And I can actually exude real love to this person without having any desire to take at all. And when I realized that every time I'm having sex with a woman before, like I never did, but I'm saying if I were to, every time I were to have sex with a woman before marriage, I'd be taking from her future spouse and I'd be taking away from her, whether she knew it or wanted to admit it or not. That's what I was doing. And I had to own as a leader, that's my responsibility. And I don't want to do that. And I'd be doing that in my own life too. And so I wanted to make deposits into a future that I wanted to live in.
Yeah.
And knowing that forgiveness and grace is always available along the way. Mm-hmm. But then inviting in fathers, inviting in friends to hold me accountable, not to my behaviors only, but also to my identity.
Yeah.
You know, the weakest form of accountability is slapping your wrist when you do something wrong. The highest form of accountability is saying, you're better than this. Who you are is this, 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 and this. And I'm going to hold you accountable to that identity.
Accountability is giving an account for your ability.
Yeah. So like, what do you have the ability to do in your true self in Christ?
Yeah. It's so good. It's so powerful. Like, I know for me, like even recognizing that if we didn't engage in sexuality when we were dating and engaged, that we actually got to build a stronger foundation in every other area for connection.
Yep.
Then getting to have sex would be like the glue that held all of that together. But getting to have that season where we could build connection in every other area, we don't know what it would have been like these last 6 years if we didn't have that, but we were both so convinced and convicted that we were the right person for each other because we got to work through so many different things and we didn't have the crutch of sexual connection. Not saying that we never crossed boundaries, because we did, but we didn't choose into that consistently. They were mistakes and messes that we cleaned up, and we saved sex for marriage. Yeah. And I think getting to have the opportunity is so vital in building a really strong connection, because you're having sex like 1% of the time with your spouse and you're doing life with them the other 99. Like, you want to make sure you have a solid connection. There was a season where it was
80-20, I'm pretty sure.
We had a lot of sex before having a baby. Yes. Thank the Lord. It was amazing too.
Right.
But getting to build connection in all of those other areas was a big reason for us of why we wanted to have such strong boundaries around sexuality.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm so thankful that we got that time. And another thing that I think of is how many men I've heard of who, if a woman gives in and does have sex, then oftentimes I think it steals from this masculine component of men who want to pursue and conquer.
They're like, oh, I've conquered.
And there's a lot of men that lose interest after that because she no longer feels like this prize to them. You know, she no longer is something that needs to be fought for and protected and earned. It's like, okay, we've already explored this. And so a lot of men, I feel like, not only lose interest, but also I think they get a lot of like intimacy triggers that come up.
I think it's one of the best things a woman can do is hold off to test a man.
Yeah.
Test him.
It reveals his character.
Yeah.
A ton.
Is he someone that has power over his impulses?
Yeah.
Or is he a man you will never respect?
This is a really good point. I mean, I think getting to have a man or woman's character revealed in these dating and engagement seasons is so important, because had you been actively choosing into pornography while we were dating, that would have broken a ton of trust for me, and it would have been a revealer that you couldn't manage your sexuality. You know, that you didn't know how to manage your impulses. And if it was pornography when we were dating, what could that lead into?
And I certainly had seasons of that, but that's why I ran to help.
Yes.
And I ran to get mentorship and guidance and fathering and counseling.
And when there were hard moments where you struggled, you came to me and you shared with me. And that was a huge trust builder too. Not saying that you did any of that perfectly, you know that, but for the audience, like, he didn't do any of that perfectly, but getting to see his character revealed in those areas was so important for building trust with us. I think our point is like, in today's society, there's so much compromise. I think there's so much confusion. There's so much engagement in people trying to seek and feel connected and figure out what they want. And I don't think that there's enough vision for why they would want to protect something, like why boundaries actually matter, what they're fighting for, and the vision for their life and marriage or future marriage.
Because I think this is such an important conversation, because when it was just sex is wrong, wait until you're married, and that was the only thing in my head, well, then you find every loophole. Okay, so, and I know this might feel graphic, but you see all these couples, well, anal's fine, oral's fine,
right?
Handies are fine. It's like, so we find all these little justifications. We're like, yeah, but this is probably fine because there's nothing in scripture about that. And it's like, do you really want to live your life checking boxes? And is that truly New Testament? Or is that like what the Jewish people did, where it's like, okay, here's what the Sabbath means now. And they created 670 or whatever it was, that many laws to back up the 10 Commandments, making things actually doable. And then Jesus came in going, I'm here to tell you that even if you hate your brother, you've committed murder. And now they're like, this is preposterous. How can, like, even if you look at another man, another woman with lust, you've committed adultery.
You can try to do everything in your own strength to fulfill the 600 and something laws, but it actually still wouldn't be enough. And I'm showing you your need for me.
Well, what scripture said was that the law empowers sin. So if you are living to check the boxes, you're living just like, okay, I'm just going to not have sex before marriage. It's like, you're not even living in connection with God that way. You're living trying to find out the right formula to cross it off outside of connection with a Father that's actually ready to love you in the midst of your failures, your mistakes, and give you wisdom along the way, a way that you can be heart connected. Yes.
I mean, his Holy Spirit's supposed to empower us. We're not supposed to just do it or not do it in our own strength. We're supposed to lean on him and let him empower us to live unto him and in alignment with him. We can't do it on our own. That's the purpose of all of the laws. It's like, no matter how hard you try, you still wouldn't be able to fulfill all of those.
Yes. Grace is not just a blanket you put over yourself when you've sinned. Grace is the empowerment to live in your true identity. And that can only happen in connection to him, not in the law. And so I'd say, like, stop living based on the law, live in connection to him. And that's going to be your greatest protector, is inviting him in. I feel scared. It feels difficult to do this, Lord. Like, I feel like I don't like myself. It's like, bring all of that stuff to him. That's the best thing you could do, is confess it to a Father that's going to love you. Like, imagine if you were the woman that just committed adultery, thrown into the town square, ready to be stoned to death because the law called for it. And then imagine someone disarming all of that, looking at you in the eyes and saying, I don't accuse you. I don't condemn you. Like, that thing is so powerful. And everybody rushes to, but then he says, go and sin no more. But you have to understand the gravity of what she experienced in her absolute worst. That hiddenness, that scary shame, that fear of punishment. To experience that type of love in that place, we all need that so deeply. And how are we going to know that if we're just focusing on the law and trying to get things right and trying to do things on our own, you know?
Yeah, it's like whenever you reach for the fruit rather than reaching for his hand, it's like, I think that's good. The picture of choosing to have sex, choosing to compromise, choosing to settle, choosing to go with what your friends are doing, what the crowd is doing, with what the guy that you're dating wants. It's like you're reaching for the fruit in that moment, whenever the Father is waiting to walk with you in Eden, which the Garden of Eden, like, Eden means pleasure. God is waiting to walk with you in full intimacy, in pleasure every single day. And every time you choose into that, you're choosing the fruit when he's like, but let me show you what would actually fulfill you. But let me like take care of your heart and meet this need for you, and then show you what I have for you, which is an amazing man that will honor you and fight for you and hold out for you and want to protect your sexuality until the day that he marries you. And even then you get to experience that with just him. It's like, if we can take a step back from trying to reach for these things in our own strength and lean into intimacy with him and say, God, it feels hard to trust you. I don't know how, but I want to learn.
Yeah.
God, I want to reach for these things that I've learned that will satisfy me physically, but I don't want to do that anymore. My spirit wants more. Like, God, how do you want to satisfy me? How do you want to fulfill me? How do you want to heal my heart so that I no longer crave those things and long for those things, but instead that I'd long for you and long to be intimately connected to you, and that I actually trust your plan for my life and the person that you have for me, and how abundant and beautiful marriage could be if I were to wait, if I were to trust you. Like, I'd say our journey's been so little about the boundaries we had in sexuality, you know, dating and engagement. It's been so much more about what's the vision that we have for our life as we trust God.
Yeah.
Like, what's the kind of marriage that he wants to bring us? How can we show up and be the fullest, most connected version of ourselves, not just for each other, but because of who we want to be and the marriage that we want to have.
Marriage is not a vehicle to satisfy your preferences and longings. Marriage is a vehicle to more perfectly make you more you. Yeah. Like your truest self in Jesus.
A simple version of that is marriage isn't there to make you happy. It's there to make you holy.
Yeah.
It, like, letting it refine you, and it leads to incredible sex. It leads to having so much fun.
It's not like boring holiness, like a priest that lives in the mountains alone.
No, it's like it's feeling like, I mean, we have hard times, but like, it's feeling free. You know, it's this experience of getting to be so deeply and intimately known, seen, and loved, getting to have someone you work through hard things with and have incredible connection on the other side. We get to play and adventure together. Like, it leads to abundance. But there are some hard decisions you have to make in the beginning to be able to get there.
Yep.
And it's so worth it. It's like, figure out what is my vision for my life and for my marriage, and what are the things, what are the boundaries and disciplines that I need to put in place in order to get there.
Yeah. Love it. So good.
That's all.
So many other things that we could talk about, I'm sure. You know, there's actually a girl that was like a top 10 OnlyFans girl that gave her life to Jesus, got rid of her account. I think she was making she was taking home $8 million a year or something like that.
That's crazy.
Gave up everything when she found Jesus, got baptized. And she's like, yeah, I didn't know how lost I was. And I think stories like that are coming out more and more. And I think that is so beautiful and so fun. And guess what? It wasn't religion and fear of punishment that led to her transformation. It was encountering a God that's perfectly loving and is showing her that this is so much worse than what's available for her life. Like, Jesus couldn't love the woman caught in adultery and not say, go and sin no more. And I think that's the biggest thing that I want people to take away from this is like, go and sin no more shouldn't be the first thing, but you shouldn't not say it. Like, you shouldn't not experience it.
Yeah.
And I think that's my case for waiting until marriage is, it's the best thing for you. And maybe you've been so shoved down and persecuted by religious figures in your life, but you have the opportunity to forgive, to let go, and to actually embrace a Father that came to abolish religion and came to reveal the end of all religion, which is that you can't do it on your own strength. You require a loving relationship with me to make it happen. And that's what we want for you. So I hope this is valuable. I hope you guys got something out of this discussion today. And if you're watching this, we'd love for you just to throw a thumbs up on the video and subscribe if you want more. And if you're listening to it, go and leave us a review on the podcast. It'd be awesome.
And also, have we announced this on our podcast?
Yeah.
We just did a huge change. No, we haven't announced it because
we have. Yeah, we've done a couple ads in the other videos.
That's right,
but
right.
if you guys, it should be in the description. If you guys want to learn about becoming a coach and getting trained and equipped to do that, that's in the description of the podcast. Mm-hmm. And then also, if you wanted to get healing, work through, your emotions, relationships, any areas that you feel stuck in your own life, the Come Alive Collective, I think it's just for women though. The Come Alive Collective is the Alive and Free Collective. There's a link down below. You can join that. It's like a month-to-month membership you guys be a part of. So love you guys. See you next time.